Hello and thank you for joining me. So today I have a project that I just recently finished a couple weeks ago. And if you guys haven't seen the video on the custom Nano Shark from Demko Knives, I'll leave a link up somewhere up here in the corner, you can check it out. But I mentioned in the end of that other video that I was going to come back to this project because I created some other scales that I think are going to be very, very fitting for this knife. And they are the Blue Rich Light, which I think will go very well since sharks live in the deep blue. This is a very deep blue, as you guys can see right here. Man, really, really happy with this one. Took me quite a while to bevel the edges and everything, but once we're up in the studio, we'll get a closer look at it. Now, I had an idea with this very specific blue. So what I'm going to do is, here's my idea. I'm going to run it by you guys first, even though I'm going to do it anyway. But just to keep you guys in the loop. So I think blue and gold go very well together. Now, I am going to keep these scales for personal use. I really like them, and the material's gifted to me, so I don't really want to get rid of these unless the price is right. Getting back to the custom part of this build, what I'm going to do is etch and stonewash the blade. So I'm debating on whether I should do a rock pattern texture on the spine and the shark lock, just to give it some character, more grip in hand when you're using it. And also heat anodizing the hardware, a golden brass color to really contrast against the blue, which I think will look really, really good. So we'll see what happens as we go along in this video. But I'm going to take you guys along with me and show you exactly how I am going to achieve this look. And feel free to comment down below if you guys know any faster ways of some of the things I'll be doing in this video. So let's go to the bench and get to it. Now that we're here on the workbench, as you guys can see, we have some T6 hardware or body screws, and the pivot is a T8. Unfortunately, Demko hasn't done the T8 hardware all the way around yet. Not really an issue, but just want to let you guys know that this is constructed that way. But very, very simple setup. There's 4 screws, or 4 body screws. 2 that go through the deep carry pocket clip, as you guys can see right there. Those Rich Light scales are super light, which I think is great. One thing I learned with these scales, since I got rid of the steel liners and just put the hardened steel washer for the bearings to ride on, is the strength is still there. Obviously, it's not going to be as strong with the steel liners, but I gave it the spine whack test. It will not break this lock. Nothing gets damaged. It still functions well. I mean, if you're going to be hard using this knife, then I completely get it, and you're going to want those steel liners. It's not going to be hard to use. Now, a trick I do to disassemble this is I pull back on the shark lock just a little bit to kind of loosen everything up, and then the pocket clip side scale pops right off. And keep in mind that spring is right in that shark lock, so you want to take it off slowly because the spring might fly around the room, but we are good there. Now, what I'm going to do is kind of wipe everything up and just get all the oil off of all the parts. So I went ahead and got the clamp ready. This is just a used t-shirt. I folded it over a few times to protect the blade when I clamp this in so it doesn't scratch it. But what I'm going to do is add a deeper sharpening choil. As you can see right there, it's not that deep. But I'm going to go ahead and do that with my Dremel, which I'll show you here in just a moment. So I clamped it pretty firm. I just really don't want this to move. And obviously be careful because you have an exposed sharp cutting edge. Just be cautious of that. Now I went ahead and got some safety glasses on, and I am wearing a face mask just so I don't breathe in the metal dust from the Dremel. You can see here, this is probably the largest diamond bit. This is going to be cutting through the steel very easily. Now when you're doing this, make sure to use 2 hands and stay as steady as you can, and always check your work. Touch it up a little bit, double check it, go back to it if you have to do it. I am going to just knock this out really quick. All right, and just like that, you got a larger sharpening choil. I'll show you guys really quick. Now, doing this doesn't add too much heat to the blade, so you're not going to ruin the heat treat. So don't stress over that. But definitely don't keep that Dremel on there too long, just sitting there. Maybe just do a little by little, and then back off, let it cool off a little bit. Yeah, so it's not even hot to the touch. But there it is, you guys. Just a little bit bigger. Now, you do end up losing a little bit of cutting edge. It's seriously not that much, but really happy with it. And now I can jump on to doing the texture on the spine. All right, so I went ahead and marked where contact points are on the blade itself and then the shark lock. So basically this is letting me know not to go past this point, because if I do, then I'm going to start messing with tolerances, and before you know it, the blade's not going to function anymore. And then here on the shark lock, I went, so basically right here, this little gap from this mark to this mark, I cannot put any texture because this is what the blade rides on and causes it to lock up and sit exactly where it needs to sit. But I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the patent number. I'm going to put that texture on the bottom and the top side. I am going to leave the jimping alone since it's nice and aggressive. Since we have a larger section here, it's going to look like shark teeth biting down. And I think it's going to be very, very fitting for this knife. And it's going to look really cool. And there is a spot on the spine of the blade where it gets very thin. You guys can see here on this swedge. So I'm going to have to make some really small scallop texture. And once I get to the tip, I'm going to have to do that texture one groove at a time because the tip is very sensitive to heat. And that's why I have some water here. So when I get to the tip, I'll do one pass with that texture, dip it in the water, let it cool, and then continue that texture all the way to the tip. Because again, you don't want to mess with the heat treat, and you really want to take your time when you get to the tip of the blade. So with that being said, I'm going to use my Dremel with the smallest sanding drum attachment. This is 240 grit, you see right here. I like 240 grit because the grain that you put into the steel really shows, and it just gives it a different effect. So really like that effect. If you want an even more aggressive, you can go 80 grit, but for me, I think that's a bit excessive. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and once I'm finished, I will give you guys a close-up look. Alright, so I have the pattern all finished. As you guys can see, I got down all the way to the tip. So the challenging part with a spine that has a lot of swedges or tapers, you can see you have to adjust this pattern to where it gets a lot smaller or thinner. You have to adjust the angle for those scallop textures to meet up in a very, very sharp point. As long as you take your time, it should come together nicely. And when I sharpen the blade, it will bring it back to a nice centered point. So it's going to look really good. I am going to etch and stone wash this, so it's going to dull it down a bit. I think if I leave it like this, it'll be too flashy, but it does look really cool in the light. And you guys can see I didn't go past my mark back here. Well, I wiped that mark off, but I didn't go past it. And it's pretty much it on the spine of the blade. And then as for the shark lock, you can see my mark right there. I didn't go past it. Maybe just a tad, but I'll be safe. And then just stopped where the jimping, the original jimping started. And then I continued from the end of the jimping on the top side, went all the way around, and even went on the underside. Alright, so I'm going to heat anodize the hardware, and I prepped the hardware and gave it a deeper satin finish. I used 400 grit to get that deeper satin finish. Just reflects better in the light, and when I heat anodize it, it'll make it pop a lot more. So I went ahead and did everything. I even did the barrel spacers. I gave it a satin finish on the inside, as you guys can see right there. Again, just the little things go a long way. But I have my torch here, and I got it on low heat. You don't need much. It doesn't take much. I have some metal tongs to hold the parts so I don't get burnt. But I'm going to show you guys exactly how I do it. And I do have a jar of water here. So when I get the right color that I want, I'm just going to dip it into the water and cool it off immediately. That way I have that color that I'm looking for, and so that the heat doesn't linger and continue to change the color. Here we go. I'm just going to do little by little. So I'm just going to go a couple passes over, take the heat off, couple passes. Again, you really want to take your time with this because you don't want to go beyond the color you're trying to achieve, and I'm trying to get that golden color. And as you guys can see, it's already changing. So what I'm going to do is try to keep that consistent. And again, a little heat goes a long way, so really be patient here. And I don't want to go crazy bronze, because if you go past it, then you're going to get purples and blues, and it just won't look right. So that's actually interesting. It reflects more gold in certain angles, which I actually kind of like that. So I'm going to go a little bit more heat and then dip it in the water. And then we're going to see what we have here. And again, it's always better to play it safe, going less heat or less golden, because you can always dry it off. And then you can apply more heat and make it more gold if you'd like, or go past that and get the blues and purples. Again, just depends on what look you're going for, but I am pretty pleased with that. Let me show you guys something real quick. So in certain angles, it's more gold. So as you guys can see, that's actually really cool. I think this is going to look really good against the blue. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and finish everything here, and then I'm going to meet you guys back up in the studio, and we're going to assemble it and take a closer look at it. Now that we're back up in the studio, we can get a closer look at the custom work. Now I want to start off with mentioning that I wanted to etch and stone wash the blade. However, I messed up big time. It didn't etch dark enough, and I tried to fix it, and it just looked terrible. So I was forced to do a hand satin finish, and then I stone washed it. But you can see there's some weird hazy parts. The flats actually came out really good, just because it was easy to get it nice and flat on the sandpaper and just do a drag pull over it to get it nice and straight. Unfortunately, I got rid of the Demko signature and the type of steel it is, but that's not really an issue. I'm just a little bummed out of how it turned out. However, I gave it an aggressive cutting edge, so super sharp, and really happy with how the scallop texture came out on the spine of the blade. So everything came out really, really good except for the stone wash. So if you guys are planning on etching and stone washing the 20 CV steel blade on the Nano, it's unfortunately not going to work unless you guys have a different method. If you guys do, let me know down below, because I'd really like to make this blade darker. Also, I have a newfound respect for people who do hand rubbed satin finishes on their blade. Not easy. I can tell you that right now. Since I was forced to do the hand satin finish, I put it on the pocket clip as well, and then gave it a stone wash. I just like a good stone wash because it hides scratches. Here is the shark lock with that same texture, and I had to do the underside. I know it doesn't get much attention, but it actually looks really cool when you look down into the knife, which I'll show you after I assemble it. But really happy with that as well. We'll definitely take a closer look at the custom blue rich light scales once it's assembled. And then I really, really like how the heat anode came out on the hardware. It's just a nice golden hue. It's not too dark, but not too light. I think it's the perfect contrast against the blue. I also did the stop pins and the standoffs, but again, we'll get a closer look at all this stuff when it's assembled. So let's get to assembling this thing. And here it is all assembled. And I am really loving that golden hue against the blue rich light. I think it looks really good. And as you guys can see, the lighter part of the flat section of the scales already darkened from the oils of my hand. Not as dark as the beveled edges that the Tung Oil created. So it's still a good contrast, I think, against the dark and the light blue. But here is the pocket clip side. I know I really like it, but as always, let me know down below what you guys think of how this thing turned out. I honestly could have done a lot better on the satin finish, but it's a very, very difficult finish to achieve. So a lot of respect out there to people who can do it. Here is the texture on the Shark Lock. And let's check out the blade really quick before we look more into that. And this is definitely something I'm going to have to go over again, but pretty happy with it for my first attempt on trying to do a hand rubbed finish. Again, I was trying to hide all the imperfections with the stone wash, but at a distance it looks pretty good. And I'm kind of thinking it might have been too dark if I was able to etch and stone wash this blade. But maybe in the future I'll figure something out. Now getting back to the scallop texture, I made sure to end it with a half triangle, if that makes any sense. So a half here, and then started it with a half at the Shark Lock, just to continue that texture evenly. So I like to do those little touches. With a lot of patience and time, you can achieve it. I can promise you that. And the main reason I chose to go with this texture was because it looks like shark teeth. So I think it's very fitting. Here are the golden standoffs, again really contrasting well with the blue. And the golden hardware has a nice contrast against the satin finish as well. Really like the standoffs because I gave them a nice satin finish, so those rings really reflect in the light. So you can definitely make it pop more and get more notice. Same with the hardware, but really pleased with it. Action is still just as good. Again, making sure I didn't affect the action, because that would have been terrible. Even without the liners. I mean, if you're really going to hard use this knife, I completely understand why you would want the steel liners. But without them, still really strong. The lockup is strong as can be. So far, I haven't had any issues. It's very strong. Lockup is very, very good. Super smooth. I might eventually put skiffs in this, but really, really happy with the action. And with all these beveled edges, I made sure to make this very, very comfortable in hand, which it is. That pocket clip is great, so the stock pocket clip works really, really good. No hot spots, and again, nothing is really poking me, even with the reverse grip. So that's kind of my main goal is when I'm focusing on the scales, is to just make it super, super comfortable. I'm just super excited that I was able to get the whole locations in the CNC, so I can repeat these scales over and over, or change the material, which more than likely I will do. And if you guys don't already know, Demko's already going to be dropping fat carbon versions here eventually with the steel liners inserted, so just keep that in mind. But there is the Demko Knives Nano Shark Custom. I guess we can call this the Deep Blue Golden Nano, but feel free to suggest any names down below. That's always appreciated. But thank you for watching. I really, really appreciate the support, and I will see you guys on the next one.